in making this thing take hold in the minds of the masses. Take that back, it's almost 900 years, isn't it? Yeah. To this day, there is no historical data, archaeological or biographical evidence in existence to substantiate the life of anyone called Jesus the Christ. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of John L. Mackenzie. John L. Mackenzie is a scholar by their standards. And John L. Mackenzie, how many of you have ever heard of this thing called the Dictionary of the Bible? Y'all ever hear that? Okay, well, John L. Mackenzie is the author of the Dictionary of the Bible. And on page 432, John Mackenzie states these words, and I quote, "The writing of the life of Jesus has been a major problem in New Testament scholarship for more than 100 years. After numerous shifts of opinion, the consensus of scholars is that the life of Jesus cannot be written. The reason is that the data for an historical biography does not exist. The only sources of the life and teaching of Jesus are in the four Gospels, and I will quote them in the order in which they were written and not in the order that we've been taught. Mark first, not Matthew. Then Matthew and Luke. And then John was added in the 4th century. So then how did Jesus come into existence? Well, let's help you understand, brothers and sisters, what it is that we were born into, raised by, and never really got a historical understanding of its origin. Everybody say Alexander. Alexander. Now, as you know, in school, our youth are taught to call this man Alexander the Great. By the way, this is a real historical person. Alexander, in my opinion, there was nothing great about him. So I call him Alexander the Greek. I call him Alexander the Barbarian. See, it depends on whose perspective you're looking at. Now, if you're looking at it from a European perspective, then you might say Alexander the Great. I mean, if you look at Christopher Columbus from an Italian or Spaniard perspective, you may say he was a great man. If you look at Christopher Columbus from the perspective of the Native American, he was a murderer. You follow what I'm saying? I mean, so it depends on whose perspective you're looking at this thing from. This man was an invader. He invaded Egypt in 332 BC, and when he went in, he removed the existing pharaoh and put himself in his place. Now check this out. You just walk up into a land, take the king off his throne, and you take the throne and you sit on it. But yet you have not the slightest idea of what it means to be a king in this culture. He insisted that the ancient Egyptian priest society would recognize him as a god, small G-O-D. See, brothers and sisters, one of the things you need to understand is in ancient Kemet, all of the pharaohs were considered gods, small G-O-D. And Alexander insisted that the secret order of Kemet would recognize him as a god and accept him into their spiritual institutions. Alexander knew that in order to effectively rule Egypt, he had to be accepted into their secret order. The Egyptians had a good habit in practice, though, and I wish we could kind of return to it today. The Egyptians did not accept, hear me now, hear me, they did not accept persons from other races or cultures into their sacred order. Y'all hear that? What did I just say? Not into their secret order, right? They didn't accept other races, they didn't accept other cultures into their secret order. So therefore, the priest of Egypt wasn't about to make Alexander a part of their society. So what he did is he demanded that they make him a god or a Sarah. This was the world's first form of racism or white supremacy. Alexander died in 323. The Egyptians never did acknowledge him as a god. So guess what happened? His successor was known as Ptolemy the First. Now, so y'all understand, whenever y'all hear the word Ptolemy, I'm talking about invader pharaohs. I'm talking about European pharaohs that didn't belong in Egypt, but they had usurped the throne. And Ptolemy the First, nicknamed Lagi or Lagi, assumed the throne, and his nickname was Soter. Everybody say Soter. Soter. You may want to write it down. It's spelled S-O-T-E-R. Soter, brothers and sisters, means Savior. Oh, shucks now. Watch how this thing comes into play. Y'all can say, that's how this happened? Soter, his nickname means Savior. Well, and he was called that because of his many military conquests. Soter also tried to get himself accepted into the ancient Egyptian priest's order. But he too was rejected. Why? He wasn't an Egyptian. In fact, he was a European who didn't belong in Kemet in the first place. Yeah, buddy. However, now this is how this stuff makes me so angry. However, he found a council of what is called Melkite Coptic Egyptians. Priests in the city of Menepher, or what is now known today as Memphis, Egypt. And guess what they did? Look at the person next to you and say, no matter what, somebody gonna be a sellout. Every time, brother, somebody is gonna be a sellout. And that's what these Melkite Coptic Egyptians did. They sold out. They violated the ancient principles of not allowing foreign cultures or people into their secret order. And these priests in Memphis complied with the request of Ptolemy I and made a composed a title for him. And what they did is they took the two names that were very special names in Egypt. The first name was Asar, who we call Osiris. The second name was Apis, which is the sacred bull in Kemet. They combined the two names, Asar Apis, and came up with the word Serapis. Write it down, S-E-R-A-P-I-S. Can I educate y'all today? Y'all don't mind this education now, do you? See, the only way you're going to be free is educating your African mind. S-E-R-A-P-I-S. It came up with the word Serapis. Now, the only place that Ptolemy I was accepted was there in Memphis. Throughout the rest of Egypt, they rejected him. So in his anger, let me tell you what the brother did. He went throughout Egypt and shut down all of the temples. Yeah, buddy. And this was the beginning of the elimination of the spiritual unity that the priests of Kemet maintained with each other. Serapis was the bearded icon that became known as the Savior. Y'all seen these pictures of a bearded Christ? Y'all ever notice Jesus always got a beard? After the closing of the temples in Kemet, Ptolemy I, or Soter, confiscated all of the divine, sacred, inspired writings which were written on papyrus scrolls and stored them in the only remaining temple in Memphis, and that was the one where they coronated him and made him Soter. From that time on, every Ptolemy ruler, every Roman ruler became what is called the vicar of Serapis. Even up to today, we still have a man called the vicar of Serapis, or Christ, and he's known as the Pope. Can I give y'all some more information? All right. Everybody say Ptolemy V. And the Rosetta Stone. All right, now let's come up a few hundred years now, just a couple hundred years, if that far. In the year 197 through 195 BC, guess what they did, brothers and sisters? There was this stone that was created by a new generation of Melkite Coptic Egyptians who made up the general council of priests and priestesses in the Dionysian temple in Egypt, in Memphis, the same city. This stone was created to celebrate the first commemoration of the coronation of Ptolemy V. And Ptolemy V's name was Epiphanes. His nickname was Eucharistos. Everybody say that, Eucharistos. One more time, say it, Eucharistos. One more time. What word do you hear in there that's very special in the Catholic Church? Eucharist. Right. The ritual that was created in honor of Ptolemy V, Epiphanes Eucharistos, was called the Eucharist and attached to the image of Serapis. Now follow this thing. Here you have this image of what we now today call the Christ, and now they have created this ritual of drinking some blood and eating some flesh, and attach that ritual to this image, and now you see how it gets connected there. This ritual was also made a part of his title, and this ritual became the first order of service in the Dionysian and other religious temples in Alexandria and Antioch. The Roman Catholic Church, who did I say? Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church, brothers and sisters, has deceived the world. I'll say it again. The Roman Catholic Church has deceived the world. Y'all hear me? They have deceived the world by teaching that this ritual is something called the Lord's Supper. This ritual existed long before so-called Jesus was even born. The Roman Catholic Church still honors Ptolemy V, Epiphanes, to this very day in what is called the Epiphany.
That's right.
Where do you think they got the word from? The Epiphany, from Epiphanes Eucharistos. Also called the Little Christ. And guess when they celebrate it? Every year. From December 26th through January the 6th. And on the January the 6th, it's called the 12th night. The Epiphany. Well, that's how all this stuff started happening. Well, then it goes up a few more hundred years. You got all this stuff going on, and we're going to deal with it in depth as we deal with the council meetings in our 9 o'clock session in our midweek study. But now I want to touch on the 5 council meetings. The ecumenical councils of the Roman Catholic Church were the events, what did I say? Events. The events that completely transformed what began with Ptolemy I's Soter into the Euro-Gentile religion that dominates the Western world today through these Roman Catholic councils. You see, brothers and sisters, let me make it plainer to you. Approximately 305 AD, somewhere around that time period, 305 AD, there was a great controversy between 2 factions of Egyptian priests, the Melkite Coptic Egyptians and the exterior Coptic Egyptian priests. And this faction went on over the sacred writings. Over the what? Sacred writings. Right. In other words, the sacred writings were of Egyptian origin. Long before there was a Matthew, long before, in fact, take that back, long before there was a concept of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, or Isaiah for that matter, or Ezekiel, or Daniel. The ancient sacred writings were written by the scribes and sacred authors of ancient Kemet. They wrote the words of the gods or the Metuneta on papyrus scrolls, and they kept them in the temples. And the Roman Empire became so powerful and such a tyrant that they demanded complete, absolute control. So they ended up securing these sacred writings. And these writings were handed to the Roman Emperor Diocletian. This controversy centered around the Serapis image. Follow this well. They were actually having an argument over this image, which the Roman Empire had decided to force upon the people. There was this brother. Thank God there's always somebody that's willing to stand up for the truth. There was this brother named Arius from Alexandria, a black man, an African, who stood up and said, wait a minute, I want y'all to know something here. I don't know, maybe he's a great ancestor of mine, I don't know. He stood up and said, I want y'all to know something. I want y'all to know that this image, this bearded figure that has become so popular, who we're all calling Soter or Savior, I want y'all to know that that image is a fabrication. All right. It was made up to please this white pharaoh. Yes. Well, people had begun to accept this thing. And for him to come along and say some stuff like this, it was causing some problems. So it literally resulted in a council meeting. Spearheaded, see, when Constantine came into power, the Roman emperor, all this war was going on over this image of Serapis. And when he came into power in 323 AD, he decided to convene a council to expand the worship of the Serapis image throughout East Africa, Europe, and Southwest Asia. Now, follow this, people. In order for Constantine to do this effectively, he needed the spiritual validation of the exterior Coptic religious community. He already had the Melkite Coptic Egyptian community. He needed the exterior Coptic religious community to back him up.